The UFC Apex is officially open for business, and Dana White's Contender Series is underway for Season 3. Brendan Fitzgerald with Paul Felder and Laura Sanko. Paul, 2 contracts given out, 4 fights we saw tonight. Let's start with Punahele Soriano, a middleweight fighter who fought in our featured bout, went all 3 rounds, but he got himself a contract tonight.
Yeah, and you know, when you saw him talking to Laura, he was very disappointed in himself. He didn't get the finish, but that's exactly what Dana's looking for. He wants guys that go out there, they go from bell to bell trying to get the finish, and that's what Soriano did. He went out there, and he was throwing bombs for those first 2 rounds, and he tried it in the third, wasn't working, got the takedown. And, you know, he was getting held down there, had, you know, control from Pickett, holding wrists. He couldn't get the finish. And I think just seeing the disappointment is one of the reasons Dana's like, okay, I like this kid. He goes out there, he tries to get the knockout, and he's upset when he doesn't get it done.
He was more than upset. I mean, he could barely talk to me back there. He was in tears. He could barely answer my questions. I was kind of astounded by it because I thought, okay, you just come on the Contender Series, you got a dominant, unanimous decision victory. That's something to be proud of, but he was clearly disappointed in that. And then, man, what an emotional roller coaster for him. Unbelievable.
And you rode those emotions with him. I think
sure
it
did.
speaks to the premise of the show, really, and what Dana White expects and what these fighters expect, that he went the distance. Yes, it was a dominant decision victory, but it was not good enough for him until it was good enough. Your thoughts on kind of the tone that it sets for the season?
Well, I think Dana White, when I was speaking to him, I could tell he had the energy. He wanted to send a message to the fighters that are going to be on the show in the future. When you come on this show, it is about laying it on the line. It's not necessarily about having a flawless performance, showing, you know, exquisite fight IQ. It's about fighting. And Dana went out there, he sent a message, and Punahele is now in the UFC, and that's amazing.
Yeah, Dana's made it clear on this show. He wants killers. He wants savages. He wants guys and girls that are going to go out there, and from the moment that fight starts to whenever it's finished, you've got to be going for the finish. And we saw that from Soriano. Also, I think the fact that he goes out, and even when it's on the ground, he doesn't mind if you get takedowns. I know people are probably out there, and they're going to be like, oh, Dana doesn't like wrestling. No. He doesn't care about it. You can pick your opponent up, slam him on the ground, knock him out, get him on the ground, submit him, use ground and pound, but getting on top at an untimed place, looking for a takedown when you've got your opponent hurt, it's not what he's looking for. He doesn't want you to go down there, just hold your opponent. He wants you to try to finish him. That's how fights should be, and especially on the Contender Series. That's what we want to see. This is your shot to get that contract. He's not just going to give them out. We've got a lot of guys in the UFC right now. There's only room for people that are going to go in, that are going to be able to actually climb to the top and be in the rankings and become champions.
And he appreciated that aggression from Soriano as well, who had never gone out of the first round in his fights before that, went the distance but was still applying the pressure in that 3rd round. The other fighter that got the contract tonight was the only fighter to get a finish victory. It was a TKO in the 1st round for Yorgan to Castro, who was the biggest underdog entering the night.
I loved it, man. You know, when you watch the footage on this guy, he had very good kickboxing, but we didn't know how he was going to handle the wrestling of Meeks. Well, flawless victory, okay? Came in, even when he got taken down, got the whizzer, popped right back up, got his space, beautiful leg kicks. To go in here and get a TKO with leg kicks,
yeah,
that's beautiful. That's something after my own heart. I love that. And I knew somebody like Dana is going to look at that and be like, I love that. Even though he doesn't have the experience necessarily, Dana doesn't care. He's like, if you go in, you're a heavyweight. We need guys in this division. If you're going to perform like that, you got a contract.
It was clear that that contract meant a lot to him, but to see his daughter, Kiara, scream in joy when her dad won. I mean, that was amazing to see that. And then to talk to him afterwards. I mean, to come from a country like he does, a very small country off the coast of Africa, this contract is truly life-changing. It's life-changing for all of these winners, of course. Yeah. But for him, this is a massive change in his life. And he was telling me back there that it hasn't quite sunk in yet.
Yeah, well, certainly he said coming into tonight, it would be a life change if he gets that UFC contract, and he did so. If you were going to give out of the Fight of the Night award, it would probably come at featherweight. That's not what the show is about, though. But Bill Algeo took on Brendan Loughnane, and Dana White, very complimentary of Brendan Loughnane for the entirety of the 15 minutes, says, I expect to see him in the UFC. It just doesn't happen after this week.
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, he shot that takedown that really bothered Dana and upset him. And I think that's one of the reasons, obviously, Dana made it clear that he didn't get the contract tonight. But I really believe that Brendan Loughnane is UFC ready. I thought he was my #1 pick because I think he's the most ready to get into the UFC. He had a little problem there at the end, went for the takedown, but I do think we're going to see him back, and I do think Dana White is ultimately going to sign this kid to the UFC, go off, rattle off 1 or 2 more wins, or maybe 1 more Contender Series win, and he now knows what he's got to do. He's got to stand up. He's sharp. He looked great. Just that one little lapse in his mental game, and he shot for that takedown, which any other time is, what we see. But when you're in here, in this arena, you got to go for broke. I had him picked, and unfortunately, he didn't get the contract.
That fight was absolutely UFC caliber, as you said, Paul. I mean, those guys went out there, and it was a battle from bell to bell. But Lucknane, he just chose, he made a bad decision, and it was clear on Dana's face. And when I was speaking to Dana backstage, I think the message he was sending was clearly in part directly to Brendan Lucknane. You can't finish a round by shooting a takedown. Although I will say, during the rounds, he did show off some nice wrestling for an English guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
He sure did, and that's a factor too, right? Another fighter out of the United Kingdom, Tyson Fury, is a big supporter of his. He had support from several members of Manchester United. We'll see what's next for Brendan Lucknane. Well, what's next for the UFC Apex is week 2 of Dana White's Contender Series, and here's a look at the fight. Miguel Baeza will fight Victor Reina, and Reina is in on a bit of short notice after the original opponent fell out. Alton Cunningham, we have seen on the show before. You have Zach Zane out of Hawaii against Justin Gonzalez in a matchup, and Richie Santiago will start the night taking on Miles Johns. That is all coming up on week 2 of Dana White's Contender Series. For Laura Sanko, Paul Felder, I'm Brendan Fitzgerald. We'll see you next Tuesday night.